Thought it was time to go ahead and make another video because some of the things that I was talking about in a previous video, which I will put in I'll put the link to that video in the description below. Some of the things that I mentioned in that video are starting to go into the mainstream news. What I mentioned was that we are in a debt war with China, and this this coronavirus, it was it originated in a lab in Wuhan, China, in a biolab. This information, governments have known about it for at least several weeks now, but it's now starting to go mainstream. Governments are starting to talk about it. President Trump in the United States mentioned it earlier today, and China is going to be taking a lot of the blame for this, and rightly so. Now, to be fair, what China is trying to do is China is trying to destabilize American markets. They're trying to destabilize the West. Now, they wouldn't be able to do this so easily if it wasn't for the fact that we are so over leveraged, we have so much debt, and our economy is so fragile, despite what the president says. And I am a supporter of the president, but despite what the president says, we have a very fragile underlying economy. What's propping everything up right now is very, very cheap, artificially cheap debt. Now, some people might say, well, why would they release a virus that's harming their own people? I want to mention, the Chinese, first off, they don't care about their own people. The CCP in China, who is responsible for this COVID 19 virus, they don't care about their own people, first of all. Second of all, there's a big problem that I believe the CCP definitely took into consideration when releasing this bioweapon into the world. And the reason I'm so convinced of it is because if you know anything about the totalitarian handbook, it's not an actual handbook, but I can tell you from studying totalitarian regimes very closely, um, there's a certain mindset that all totalitarians have. And that mindset is they think that their system of government is superior because of the swiftness with which they can act, and they believe their system is more efficient. So what do I mean by that? The Chinese don't have a problem locking down their economy. They don't have a problem quarantining people, locking them up, ordering people to stay at home. They don't have to do that. They already have their economies on lockdown. As a matter of fact, the very disgusting regime in North Korea was bragging about not having the COVID 19 issue in their problem. Now, they're probably lying, but what they're bragging about, what they're telling the world, is that we don't have the problem because these totalitarians are so proud of their ability to snuff out problems very quickly, by i.e., they take people out back and shoot them. Now, this virus, I believe, and I've tried to learn a lot about this virus, and I don't um, know as much as I would like to. There's a lot of lies out there, and I don't know a lot about medical stuff. However, I believe it's going to be a bigger problem in the West than it was in China and other um, totalitarian states. The reason for that is because it's so difficult for free countries, Western countries, to lock down their countries. It's very difficult for them to do. Some places in the United States are actually trying to do that. Up in Michigan, there was a mass protest today. People with their cars going to the Capitol protesting the lockdown orders. I know certain religious people have been fined, I think in Mississippi and other places throughout the country for attending even drive-in services, church services. See, in the United States, people have the right to peaceably assemble. So the government cannot prevent large groups from gathering privately. Now, in public settings, public areas, that's a different story. But the government does not have the ability to prevent American citizens from congregating, especially in places of worship or anything like that. They don't have the power to do it. And part of the reason why markets have been so strong in the West up until this point Part of the reason that markets have been so strong in the West, why our economies are so strong, is because of the amount of freedom we have. And personal liberties and economic freedom, this is something that the government run education system in the United States has completely lost and not taught people. Economic freedom and personal liberties go hand in hand because having the freedom to go out and spend your money, having the freedom to innovate, to do things, to experiment, just having liberties, it frees up the economies, being able to go wherever you want, whenever you want to. This creates a vibrant economy. This supports a vibrant economy. You need a free people to have free markets. The West cannot, or the, excuse me, a lot of the Eastern world, China cannot compete with that because their economy is not as free. Now they can compete on another front, and that is they have very cheap manufacturing. Their labor is much cheaper over in China, and they have the manufacturing base. They know they have the manufacturing base. And over the course of the past 12 years, as the economy in the United States has expanded, most of those jobs have been service sector jobs, bartenders, servers, waiters. And these jobs don't produce anything. And when the economy started to shut down, what were the jobs that first were impacted the most? It was the service economy. These are the people who these are the people who were applying for unemployment first. This is why President Trump has been trying so hard for the past 3 years to bring the manufacturing base back to the United States. In particular, he has done a decent job of bringing back American steel production and oil production. Now, I do support the president. I will say he has been outright lying about the markets for the past 3 years. He was honest about the markets when he was candidate Trump. When he was President Trump, he began to lie. Now, in all fairness, Trump is fighting a two-front battle here. On the one hand, he has to keep markets confident, which requires lying. If you were to get up and tell the truth and tell everybody how weak the underlying economy is, how over-leveraged we are on debt, there would be a panic and markets would tank. So on one front, he has to keep markets confident as he fights this economic war. On the other hand, he has to fight this virus. So he needs to contain this virus, and the Chinese know this. The Chinese know that the West is going to have a very hard time keeping their markets open while simultaneously controlling and containing the coronavirus. That's a big problem for the Western world. And it very well could be more difficult. Now I hope that with whether it's some sort of non-New World Order vaccine or some sort of cure or whatever, I don't know what the medical community is going to do in response to this. Hopefully we are able to nip this in the bud fairly quickly. However, from the onset, it's been much more difficult, I think, for Western countries to deal with, in a sense, because we have freer economies. We have freer peoples, and people don't like to be told what to do here. Places like China and North Korea, they don't have a problem cracking down on their people. They already have firewalls in place. They already control the internet. They already censor people, and they already can confine people to house arrest, and they do not have the same liberties over there. You cannot criticize the CCP over there. It's a much more difficult battle in the West. Fundamentally, I believe that we're going to come out on the winning end of this. I think this is going to, long run, I actually think this is going to screw China very badly. I think the world is going to hold China accountable for this, but there are many countries that are eager to exploit this situation and turn on the Western world. Now, what China has been doing, something else that China knows. China is not policing the world. Okay, China does not have military installations all over the place like the United States does. The United States is protecting a lot of countries. We have military installations, I forget, but well over 100 countries. We are all over the place, protecting people, providing them with defense, deterring invasions in places like Israel or South Korea and many other places. We're all throughout Europe. We held that continent up during the Cold War and deterred to a large extent Soviet aggression. And it's countless. So what all the Chinese have to do, and they've been doing for years, is going to certain countries, especially in the developing world, and saying, hey, you know, we understand that you're doing trade with the United States, and it's probably in your interest to do so, and you know that they have your back if something were to happen. But, if you ever see that it's no longer in your interest to do business with the United States, if you feel that they can no longer provide you with the protection that you're looking for, give us a call. Here's our business card. That is the long game that the CCP has been playing. And right now they're making moves expanding in the South China Sea during this crisis. China wants to be top dog, and they want to take the United States out. They have certain advantages, we have certain advantages. We control the world reserve currency. That is a huge advantage. They do not suffer from what many refer to as imperial overstretch. So they have bases and an expanding military in their region in certain places, but they are not overstretched like we are. They are responsible for their region and do not have the responsibility of defending as many places around the planet as we do. They also have, it's also easier for them to crack down on their populations. Same with countries like Iran. It is a very, it's a sad thing. We're in a debt war and it's turned biological. We're in a debt war and it's turned biological, and we're gonna have to see. We're gonna have to see what happens. I have faith, and I do have faith that the American people can pull through this. But our economy, we are overdue for a Great Depression, worse than the 30s. We're so overdue for it, and politicians always do the wrong thing in that they never let the market do what the market is supposed to do. The market's overdue for a correction. Okay, politicians' number one job during an economic downturn, a majority of people don't believe this. It's incomprehensible to our generation. The number one job of politicians during an economic downturn is to do nothing. Okay, that's almost impossible for a politician to do because nobody wants to see an economic downturn on their watch. So, by definition, everything that politicians do in an economic downturn is the exact wrong thing. They get it wrong every time because they don't allow markets to correct. They just inflate bigger and bigger, more unsustainable bubbles. And now we have a situation like we're in now. So, it's a huge problem. Things are not going to be easy. We will see if we are able to become a self-sufficient people over here in the United States. I believe that we do, probably more than any other country, we do have the ability to become self-sufficient. The era of globalization is, at least temporarily, coming to an end. I think just like before World War II, countries are going to become a lot more nationalized. They're going to be a lot more protectionist in their policies, in protecting their domestic workforce and things like that, domestic production. And it's going to be necessary for a while. From what I understand, the United States is most capable of feeding its population. Even China and Europe have a much more difficult time doing that. The Europeans have come up with agricultural policy in the European Union that is very much helped their population become more sufficient as a collective. But the truth of the matter is, a lot of that burden falls on France. So we're going to see how countries like France respond in the short term, because the people's interests are very much going to turn inward. They're going to turn nationalistic. People are going to be concerned about feeding their own populations. They're not going to be as concerned about globalization right now because we are going through a world economic depression. Okay, we're overdue for it. The West has been very irresponsible in its handling of debt, and it's time to pay the piper. Now, I may have mentioned in the last video, I was concerned about a credit freeze. I thought that was very possible. I do not believe that a credit freeze is going to occur. One of the things I did do to protect myself, among many other things, was holding physical cash. There will not be a credit freeze because the government is going to provide as much liquidity, money printing, as possible to banks. They're going to allow people not to make payments on their mortgages, student loans, etc. And this morning I woke up to helicopter cash. So the IRS deposited 1,200 US dollars right into my bank account. I woke up in a socialist country this morning. That's socialism. And bailouts are going to be handed out left and right. It's not just going to be the banks this time. It's not just, it will be the auto industry. It'll be every industry, airline industry. Everybody is going to receive a bailout. The government gets to pick winners and losers. We do not live in a capitalist society. We have not lived in a true capitalist society in a very long time. And what that has caused is a dollar bubble, a systemic intergenerational bubble. That is why, if you want to protect yourself financially, one of the best things that you can do is buy gold and buy Bitcoin. I definitely recommend buying gold. If you do some research and learn about Bitcoin, I highly recommend buying Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is a better bet. Gold is a safer bet. Gold has history on its side. Gold is what central banks have been hoarding. And you cannot lose by holding gold and Bitcoin long term. You can lose by holding US dollars long term, and stocks for that matter. Now, something else I've been saying is that the stock market is overdue for a major correction, and that it could go very much sub 10K. The Dow Jones could go very much sub 10,000. Now, we could see new all-time highs. That is possible. I don't think it's going to happen, but it is possible. If that happens, it's not going to prevent the normal goods and services and groceries that we buy. The prices of those things are going to continue to go up. Okay, the printing press can make the stock market go up. It can reinflate the bubble, but it cannot prevent price increases all throughout the other economy. The purchasing power of the dollar is what's getting hammered, and the dollar is going to drop like a rock. And I do not trust stocks. I'm playing with stocks. I have my own strategy, and I'm trying to make some money off of this situation. However, I am not in stocks long term. That is not where I put my long term money. My money is not long term in stocks. If you want to protect your money long term, buy real estate, artwork, anything that can store value long term. And if you want to be really smart and make sure that you have hard assets that are liquid, buy gold and Bitcoin. You cannot lose by holding real money. Gold and Bitcoin are real money. The dollar might as well be toilet paper. As a matter of fact, now, as we're seeing, it's actually less valuable than toilet paper, isn't it? Governments and international institutions are going broke. We are going to see one of two things. This might sound like an obvious statement, but we're going to see one of two things. One, we're going to see a very big totalitarian government that oversees everything, oversees a very neo-feudal, impoverished population in the United States, I'm speaking of, in the Western world, really the whole world. Or we're going to see very small government again. We're going to see power delegated back to the people. How is that possible when the government's intention is to do everything to the contrary? Because the government's going broke. Now, a couple of days ago, he knows how to rile up all the right people. A couple of days ago, the president announced that the United States was no longer going to be providing funding for the World Health Organization. Reasons include covering up certain information about the outbreak, etc., yada, 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 whatever the reason may be. Long story short, governments are going broke, okay? The United States is no exception. So we're not going to be giving money to international institutions. Trump is going to be using that money here on our own citizens. And he's, in the past, advised other nation states to do the same thing, to protect their own citizens first. That's what Trump ran on. I do believe that's what he believes in, and that's what he is doing, and I judge a politician by their actions, not by what they say, not by what the media says. I'm voting for Trump because I approve of all the things that he has done, or most of the things that he has done in terms of foreign policy and everything else. Don't care that he's a loudmouth. Don't care about all the things that all the pansy people who don't know anything about how reality works get all offended. I don't really care about that. What I care about is um, national security and the national interest. Now, just like the previous presidents, when it comes to an economic crisis, Trump is doing everything wrong. Okay, I'll give you that. Trump is going to try and um, he's going to try and keep the economy afloat while we deal with this debt war with China. And Trump, just like every other politician, needs to make sure that he gets reelected, right? So all his efforts will be worth nothing if he doesn't get reelected. Yes, Trump's lying about the stock market. He blows smoke constantly, okay? I judge him by his actions. He's a very competent individual. He's a very smart individual. If you don't know that he's a smart individual, um, you're probably completely programmed by whatever it is, whatever media you consume. Everybody needs to protect themselves in many different ways. I have a year's worth of food as well. Okay, I have gold. I have Bitcoin. I have cash. I have food. Yes, I have firearms and ammunition. People are in denial. Still, people think, oh, the economy is going to open back up, the virus is going to go away, and people are in denial. And I've been trying to tell people about this for the past 5 years. I've been stocked up on toilet paper for 5 years. People are still in denial. We are going through the greatest depression in our lifetimes. We're going to go through an economic depression worse than the 1930s because it's going to be a hyperinflationary depression. Okay, in the depression, people actually had savings. Now everybody, uh, now we have a hyperinflated currency. We're over leveraged on debt. The entire economy runs on debt, and it's going to be pretty ugly to see. I'm not happy about it, but I know I'm right about it. And every day, more and more things that I've been saying for the past 5 years are coming true. Venezuela fits into all this. Um, I said, I believe over a year ago, and I made a video about it if you want to check it out. If the United States invades Venezuela, it's to preserve the petrodollar. Venezuela has been circumventing what I've talked about, the system called the petrodollar. The world, the dollar is very much reliant on petroleum. We arm the Saudis, and the Saudis demand US dollars in exchange for their oil. That creates an artificial demand for US dollars around the globe because the dollar is no longer on the gold standard. The economy was on its way to tanking in the 70s until Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon negotiated that deal with Saudi Arabia. This is why China is backing Iran. We are backing Saudi Arabia. Iran and Saudi Arabia have their own regional rivalry, and Iran very much wants to be the dominant power in that region. Back to Venezuela. Venezuela is attempting to circumvent this petrodollar system, and the United States is sending warships to Venezuela to prevent drug smuggling. And they are accusing Maduro, who was the president who was responsible for creating this system that circumvents the United States dollar. They are accusing him of all kinds of drug charges and all this stuff, and it's not about drug smuggling, okay? It's not about drug crimes. This is about preventing the smuggling of oil and the smuggling of gold. That is what this is about. Russians were in Venezuela airlifting gold out of the country a couple years ago. There is a global monetary reset about to occur. Everybody is positioning themselves. China, United States, Russia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, everybody, Venezuela. Everybody is positioning themselves for this reset. What is the world going to be like? It is going to be a change in world order. This occurs about every 70 years or so. The last time this occurred was 1945. Time prior to that, arguably, was 1918. Time prior to that was, I believe, 1815. Time prior to that was the Treaty of Westphalia, I believe in 1648. It occurs periodically. We're going to see a change in world order. It is directly linked to the currency. That currency right now, that is the world reserve currency, is the United States dollar. The United States dollar is about to be hyperinflated away. It's going to crash like a rock. Oil prices are crashing like a rock. And get ready. Protect yourself and your family financially, physically, and do what you have to do. I'm going to make more videos. Things are getting very interesting. My biggest recommendation, arm yourselves and protect yourself with gold, silver, and Bitcoin.